Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you so much for checking out the series. As always, you know the drill. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, a brand new one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it's a great way to keep up with your favorite artists. And I got to tell you, I am so excited right now to be talking with Junkie XL. I've got Thomas on the line. Hi, how are you?
I'm excellent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You, as always, have a lot going on, and we're going to try to talk about a few of those. But of course, front and center right now, we're talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, this new cut, the original what idea that he had in mind for this. And for anybody that doesn't know the story, I'm sure you can tell in more detail, but he was on board, he was doing Justice League, then he was off the project. There was a new version that was sort of the Frankenstein version, and now this is, do you call it the director's cut?
It's really like Zack Snyder Cut because he's fully in control at this point, and it's very great to see. I'm so happy for him that this happened, and I'm also happy for myself because I also felt disappointed that what I started was not able to come out, and that he was able to do it, and I was able to do it with him again with a whole new, fresh approach to it. And mind you, a movie that is 2.5 hours longer than the original one ever was. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it, you make it count. A 4-hour movie, as we're all looking forward to here. So, what for you? You were on the original score before it all got taken away. Did anything survive from that? Is this all brand new? Because this is a mountain of music.
Yes, everything is new, and I'll tell you, there are 2 reasons primarily. One was that I listened back to what I did, and I remember when I start playing back some of the things that I did, and back in the day, I was like 50% in, 55% doing this. Um, I listened to it, and immediately that uh, negative feeling from that whole time period, what happened, just also came back, and I was like, oh, I don't want this for something that feels so great to now finally do. It was one trigger to consider to start over. The second one was that since I worked with him, I worked with so many great directors and on really great films, including in collaboration with Peter Jackson, with Robert Rodriguez and James Cameron, with George Miller, with Tim Miller. And I really felt that I learned so much. And then on top of what I just said, looking back, it's like, oh, I would approach this completely different right now with all the experience that I have. So I decided to start over, and I mentioned this to Jacques, and he said, oh, by all means, I'm not married to anything that we did in 2016. He said, in fact, I'm going to throw in a bunch of different ideas myself. And so he really egged me on, and also to take it to the furthest levels that I potentially could take the score, from as classical as you can get to as modern and aggressive as you can get, as out there as you can get, experimental wise. And that's where my Mount Everest started, smack middle in the new COVID world, working in isolation on my own, and climbing this insane mountain of deliver so much music within a time span of 8 months. And it definitely resulted in a way more intense score than I ever anticipated in 2016.
Yeah, I was thinking like you hear artists talk about records that they would like to redo from their past or whatever, and unfortunately most of the time when they do it, it's because some artists do, they'll reimagine old classic records or whatever. But of course, as the audience, we have basically what ends up being demoitis. We're still attached to that first version that we heard, so it's a weird relationship. You sort of benefit in this way that you got to do that. You got to go back and say, oh, if I would do that different. It's just that we didn't hear the original version, so we're not attached to anything like that. I mean, that's kind of an interesting way of working, I guess.
But definitely. But on top of that, I wasn't done. So if the score was completely done, signed off, recorded, mixed, and everything, okay, potentially it would be a different ballgame. And then we could still say, you know what, I'm going to start over, but I'm gonna potentially release, what was done in 2016. But I simply wasn't done. And when I say I was 50% in, it doesn't mean 50% of the movie was completely done and the other half I still needed to start. It was all like under construction, throughout. So I potentially would not release it like that, because it would really feel like demo in an ultra edition. Other than that, how you started this question, I would never redo something that I did in the past. I'd rather start something new. I never consider something that I do like, oh, that was my masterpiece, or that is the thing that I was so unique that I'm just going to take that again, make some changes to it to make it between brackets perfect, which simply doesn't exist in the creative world. There's this famous saying, you're never done with a piece of art, you just abandon it.
Right.
And that's how I feel. It's like, okay, learned that, did that. But for instance, if we look at some of my more iconic scores, like for instance, Fury Road, Mad Max, would I, in hindsight, with the knowledge that I have now, do certain things different in 2014? Yes, of course. But it doesn't mean I have to redo it now. It's like, it's done. Let's think ahead,
So as you're moving ahead, when you went into this, you've already said that, you call this the Mount Everest and everything, and encapsulating so many different genres, which you do over this humongous score. But was there a vision of what you wanted it to sound like musically? I mean, yes, there's a lot of genres, but what brings it all together? What is that sound that you were going for?
In this new version that
in
we're
the new
talking
version, yeah.
Well, I thought it was important that the through line is their production technically, the way that I approach orchestral sounds and modern sounds and rock sounds and hip hop sounds. So it felt like one through line. On the other hand, don't switch hard from one thing into another, like going through 10 different radio stations. It's like, oh, radio station A is only classical music. Radio station B is like R&B modern, and C is only trap, and D is only trance music, and this is only that. So it feels like all the time. I wanted it to blend over in each other, like almost like a handoff. And so when a full orchestral piece would then end up being a rock piece, things would start to seep in towards the end of that orchestral cue. So by the time you go to a rock piece, it's not like, what happened here? It's like, it's a handoff into it. And so that took quite some time to shape that right. But it worked out, and I'm very pleased with the result. And the thing that blends it also together is that I did most, except for the orchestral elements, all the other instruments I played primarily by myself. And so you have like a certain approach to things, because you can't help yourself, just like, I'm Tom, if you play in a band, yeah, the drummer has a unique way of drumming and the guitar player has a unique way of guitar playing. But my guitar playing is somewhat similar to how I play drums, and it's somewhat similar how I bang on other materials to record or play with my synthesizers. I mean, if you look around here, the room is packed with all kinds of instruments. And so that's why I call myself a full contact composer. I want to be in touch with these things, which automatically what you do will result in like a certain style and a certain approach.
Yeah. You talk about working on it solo. I mean, because of the quarantine, because of the pandemic, is this like the most, do you usually work like this, or is this really the most solo that you've done, for a piece like this?
I would say this is, together with a few other movies, this is really like a solo affair. Of course, I used assistants to make stems to help out with conforms, when the picture comes back and there's like a minute and a half gone to glue everything together. The amount of hours of music that needed to be delivered was just like so steep in the limited amount of time that was there. So I wanted to focus on just writing new music, and just attacking scene by scene that I wanted to attack. But obviously I had help, but it was done in a completely different setup than ever done before, because normally we work in this studio house with like a couple of assistants, and we have lunch together and we have dinner together, coffee in the morning. I walk from room to room. They sit with me, they hear what I'm doing. And so that was simply not happening. And that made it so intense to work on it, but also eye-opening at the same time. And I will not be the first one to say how COVID was a curse and a blessing at the same time. People are so damn creative, to find like new ways to do things that didn't deemed possible before. And so this happened in my own microcosmos as well.
Yeah, you can hear that intensity. You really can on these, especially the first few singles that you dropped in there. I mean, of course, it is dark. I wrote down at one point, I was like, the power of a choir to be scary as fuck. To be really creepy in there, and those are choices, right? I mean, at some point you say, what does this need? Does this need a center? Does this need that? Especially the choir, like why do you use those picks? Because that's a specific mood.
Very specific, and this was the perfect movie to do it. I mean, I've always been a big fan of but let's put it different, the word that I picked earlier in the show, like deep admiration, for certain music styles. Like classical music is one of them, and for orchestral music, primarily 1880 to 1930. What happened in that time period was so groundbreaking and so pushing the limits. But then in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, we had all these composers like Arvo Pärt and Ligeti who were really like pushing what you could do with choir music, and that's where that microtonal detuning and just like it's like they start singing and it's like, man, when are the wheels coming off? And and it's so intense. So when you hear that like in a church or in a big recording studio, it's so scary. Human voices can be so scary. Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
I think that speaks for a much bigger conversation when you just say human voices can be so scary. That says a lot more than I think you were meaning it to right then, actually.
It's the two of us in this podcast.
That's right. So, getting into, I don't know if you work like this, but, usually with a lot of scores that I'm familiar with, characters will have themes. You'll have character themes, the music that always comes up when you're, going towards that one. If you do that, what do you look for? What did you look for specifically on this one to, to bring those characters into their own musical moments?
Well, first I want to point out that two themes have a bleed over quality from what Hans and I set out to do in Batman vs Superman. So there's Superman material that is bleeding over in this movie, and the Wonder Woman theme is bleeding over in this movie, but a completely different take on it. But it is the same material. It also made sense because this Justice League movie is the third in a row of Zack Snyder, so there's like certain things that bleed over. For Batman, I did a whole new thing for this movie, and I'll tell you why. The focus in Batman vs Superman of Batman music was really his troubled past and the loss of his parents and how he dealt with that in that movie while dealing with a bunch of other things. In this movie, that chapter is closed because it is well depicted in Batman vs Superman. Same as certain aspects of Superman that have been well portrayed in Man of Steel, then continued storytelling in Batman vs Superman. There are certain things there that we don't need to say again, also musically. So those two themes bled over from the previous movies, but not Batman, because in this movie, we know what happened to him because of Batman versus Superman. In this movie, he has dealt with that and he moves forward, and so it's it made it possible to have a new approach for him, musically speaking. Um, so he has a very distinctive theme in this one. Steppenwolf is the bad character, if you will, together with Darkseid and the Mother Boxes. And that is a whole new theme that is very intense, and it's primarily where that choir comes in that we just talked about. So he has a very distinctive sound and theme. Cyborg has also a very distinctive theme throughout the movie, as does Aquaman throughout the movie. And then, of course, the most important theme, I would say, is the Justice League theme, of which Crew at War Power is like a sample of what that tastes like for the rest of the movie. So it comes back in various different forms throughout the movie. And obviously, the reason why that track is called Crew at War Power is because, it plays when the crew are at war power, when they're kicking ass all together. So...
It's such an interesting way to write, being able to use, you already sort of know a sound that you've got to put in a song right there. It makes me think of, like, even in rock lyrics, Springsteen would use the same, female name over, and you have a lot of artists that do that. It seems like that. I don't know. Do you think that makes it easier or harder when you're approaching a song if you already know, well, it's got to have, this structure, these chords, these notes, this riff, whatever?
Well, Hans said to me something very interesting at a certain point when we talked. Obviously, we collaborated together pretty intensely for 2.5 years or so when I was at his studio. But also, we maintained really good friends, and I even talked to him 2 days ago about like some new synth that we both want. And he said to me once that, and in a way, it's true. That every composer, every artist, every painter, every architect builds or makes, up to 10 different things in his life. All the other things fall under one of the pillars, family, of what you've built before, but you're enhancing it because you have a certain style. That's why you immediately recognize Coldplay. That's why you immediately recognize U2. That's why you immediately recognize Radiohead. And so that makes it very strong. And so in the composing world, there's something very similar, is that people recognize something that I do because I have a distinctive style and a distinctive approach. People recognize Hans because he has a very distinctive style. And so people also recognize John Williams because he has a distinctive style. And that makes the landscape of composers so colorful, because who wants to be 100% John Williams and the next day 100% Danny Elfman and the next day 100% Tom Holkenborg or Hans Zimmer? It's that's no fun. It's fun to create an identity that you're recognizable with. So you know what you can do, you know what your parameters are, and you know what you want to learn, where the open landscape is, where you want to discover new things. And that combined with an artistic vision of what you want to do with the film. And then when you see the film to check out if that still holds up, what you were thinking about, that creates, to a certain extent, something that makes it a little easier to attack a massive mountain like this. But like real mountaineering, you still need to walk to the top and, make sure you come down safe.
Yeah. It seems like it'd also give you a lot of opportunities, like especially, in these DC movies, Easter eggs is a big part of the deal, and musically, do you find that you can put those sort of things in there? I mean, themes take care of that to a point, but do you take those opportunities to drop in little musical secrets as well?
Not necessarily a secret, but to speak to people's imagination, what potentially this could mean. I mean, it's so funny with the 2 singles that you mentioned earlier that were released. If you read the comments, what people leave behind, DC fan has their own imagination what this absolutely must be. You know, it's like people describe when they see the crew at Warp Hour, it's like, this is when Batman does this and this and this, and this is the moment where Wonder Woman does that and that. So it's interesting to see that necessarily without intention directly is the way that music can speak to the imagination of people what supposedly is to happen at a certain sport. And I find that very great to see.
Yeah. Well, I want to quickly hit on a few of the other things you got coming up. Of course, the Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't the only one. We've also got Godzilla versus Kong that's coming out. What did you want to do this one? Because this is a different, very different sounding kind of score here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's every movie obviously is different, and I remember talking to Zack and about Army of the Dead, and I said, Zack, I come off like a bunch of like orchestral heavy movies. Do you mind if we do this fully electronic? He's like, oh yes, I hope you would say that. You know, so that's really great. And King Godzilla is also a very unique animal, no pun intended. What the score became for that. I mean, I met the director, Adam, is a really great guy, very talented. He's a massive Elvis fan, so that created a connection right away because I remixed in 2002 A Little Less Conversation, the Elvis song. And we're both Godzilla fans. I mean, I have all the 36 movies and I know them inside out. I can quote most of the dialogue even for you. And so it was a very interesting approach to that movie because he said to me, I want to honor the classic monster scores from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And at the same time, I want a lot of John Carpenter style synthesizer music in there. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do. And so that was a very interesting process as well. And we pulled it off. It has great old monster type parts, but then it's infused with these 80s synthesizers that work remarkably well in a movie like that. And then for Kong, there's so many more emotional scenes where the music is very like world music almost, you know, Pacific marimbas with like a beautiful stone flute that is playing his like lyrical melody. And it's great to work with all these colors, you know, in one movie. So that movie is, it for me, has the same special elements as Justice League, whereas it's a completely different area of taking things from the past and just combining them into like something completely new, you know? So it's really great. And Army of the Dead is primarily a sound design score that leans very heavy on the emotional side of things instead of like just the horror things. And by the way, that movie is so different than what you would expect. And I'm not going to say anything. I want everybody to have that. What? It is like what I had when I saw it for the first time. It's brilliantly executed.
Oh, you know what you do. It's so much fun to listen to, and the way you talk about the music, the way you talk about what you do and how it affects the characters, like thinking about the depth of Kong's emotions versus what Godzilla might be. You know, hearing what we might get from Army of the Dead. I mean, you make it so much fun to check out. So I appreciate what you do. Thank you so much for doing it, man. It's so cool to talk to you about all of this.
Well, you know, I have to say that every day when I wake up, I sit outside, not this morning because it's raining, but I sit outside and I have a coffee when the sun comes up and I'm just thinking by myself, you are a happy, you're a happy guy, that you can do this and basically with so much passion, I can work on all these things with the smartest people in the room, with talented people, with people with crazy ideas. It's so great.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about that all again. We're talking about Army of the Dead. We're talking about Godzilla and Kong. We are especially talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League and the 4-hour movie and all the score that comes along with it. Congratulations on all this, but thanks so much for the conversation today.
Hey, thank you so much, man. It was a pleasure to be with you.
All right, we'll see you around. Take care.
Yo, hey, bye, guys.